We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mishi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Mishi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. The only remark that I'd like to make this morning is that we did get a lovely note from the Haliburton County Home Builders Association, just expressing their appreciation for having been awarded or given the Warden's Award at the Chamber Gala. So anybody who'd like to look at that, it's right here. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for today? Councillors Fury and Carter.
That November 13th, 2024 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. And I'm very pleased to welcome Staff Sergeant Mike Cavanaugh today as our interim detachment commander. He's joined by Paul, I believe your last name is McDonald, right? So welcome. Welcome to Haliburton County and to our council.
Good morning. Thanks for having me to County Council today. And for this introduction, like the mayor said, my name is Mike Cavanaugh, and I'm happy to be back in Haliburton. I was here in 2018 as a road sergeant, working on platoon. And when I got the chance to come back, I thought it was great. I could spend the days working with my former colleagues, and my sister's a nurse at the hospital, so I can pop in and visit her whenever I like. So I have 20 years with the OPP. I've worked a lot of frontline, Peterborough County, City of Kawartha Lakes, Upper Ottawa Valley. I've been a part of the Organized Crime Enforcement Bureau Drug Enforcement Section. And in 2014, after the shootings of Parliament Hill, I was seconded to the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team on a surveillance detail where we monitored national security targets within the province. So that was great, but I sort of missed building relationships in the community, and brought me back to frontline policing, which I'm very happy about. And I get to come back to Haliburton now since the beginning of September, and the drive here is better than when I was a kid. I was raised in Lakefield, and I'm a product of Lakefield Minor Hockey. And I always had a bit of anxiety when we would drive up to Haliburton to play hockey, because the kids here who played hockey, they're always like 6 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier. So yeah, you do. I'm 51 years old, and when I still walk into corners, I look over my shoulder thanks to Haliburton hockey. So it's a good thing. The detachment is it's a great place to work, and everybody there is engaged in the community. We, like any place, we have some staffing challenges, but for the most part, everyone is pretty motivated, mission focused on what we're going to accomplish here. Since September, we've seen an increase in enforcement of our Big Four. We have our Festive Ride campaign beginning at the end of the month, and we're going to be on the roads and hopefully do a lot of contact with the community out there in a positive way. Fingers crossed. And the billing statement, I know it's going to be an issue coming up for the detachment board, and hopefully I can provide some clarity on what that's about. I'm so far enjoying everything in Haliburton County. But if there's any questions.
Well, I just we're really glad to have you here, and it's nice to have someone here who's had some previous experience in Haliburton, and we hope we can keep you for a while.
Let's hope so.
Any questions from council or comments? Well, we look forward to having our first detachment board meeting. I think that's coming up fairly soon, and we look forward to working with you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Do we have a resolution to see that? Okay. So we have nothing on the consent agenda. Under the office of the CAO, there is a question about preferences for delegations at the Roma conference. So I'm just looking to members of council to say whether or not you would prefer to have, are seeking a delegation on any particular subject. Councillor Carter, I can see you're ready to fire.
Well, I spoke briefly to Gary yesterday. We had a meeting with the Attorney General 2 weeks ago. And at the time, the Attorney General asked us to come up with a proposal for dealing with tenant relationships in public housing. And I think that we should ask for, with CKL, ask for a delegation to the Attorney General and provide him with a proposal at that time.
So have you spoken to the city about doing that?
If I might, yeah, so after
Absolutely.
speaking with Councillor Carter yesterday, I spoke with Ms. Faber at CKL and I'm talking with Ron Taylor at my counterpart at CKL. So we're looking to put something together going forward. I'll be able to report back to council as we in the coming weeks.
Okay, anybody have any questions about that, Councillor Carter?
I have another one with I think it would be worthwhile to try to have a delegation with the Ministry of Education about this busing issue. I think that we have to, keep the pressure on and have them recognize that they provide guidelines, yes, at the ministry to the school boards, and obviously, if a school board completely ignores their guidelines, they would be, they could say, "Hey, what are you doing?" But the fact of the matter is that a lot of these school boards seem to take it as gospel. And, our rural communities are very different than, than built up areas. As a matter of fact, when we had the discussion, the school board was saying, well, geez, in Huntsville, these kids have to walk along the streets with no sidewalks, and they're walking through a subdivision, which is a lot different than walking along 118, or Galert Road or Bob Cajun Road. And so I don't know, it would be nice because there is this separation between what the Ministry of Education does and then the school board's independence. It would be nice to at least bring it to the attention of the ministry that we've got these problems with these school boards, and I don't know, Councillor Ferry, if you agree that we can try to put some pressure on them.
I'm just wondering whether that would, I mean, I understand the problem and that it's impacting both of you more than the rest of us, but I just wonder if that is in fact a county delegation, or if it might be better coming from yourself as a mayor of a municipality. And
Well,
just putting it out there.
there's school in Highland East also, so there's 3 of 4.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Warren. Just to support Councillor Carter's comments, I think one of the issues that struck me is from a county perspective, I think the idea of the joint delegation is a strong one, because from just a straight risk management liability issue, they're county roads that the children are being forced to walk on a greater distance. So I think there's a joint impact for all of us. I think a coordinated one through us, similar to what we're doing at CKL, if the county coordinated it, invited different participants from the local municipalities, I think it would be an effective use of a delegation.
Okay. It was just a question about, how best to approach it. Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, I would concur with that, and just to complete the picture, in Algonquin Highlands, we do not have a school, but we have several bus routes, and they're all within the same school board as the rest of Haliburton. So we also fall into that.
Councillor Rail.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, especially when you're in, like in Wilberforce, where we've got a county road going right through, and the school's more or less right on that county road. So it would be really good if it all got from one single voice as a choir.
Okay, that sounds like we're in agreement with that. Any other possible delegations that you'd like to pursue? Do we need a resolution on that? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to go forward with those two, Councillors Burton and Carter?
The Haliburton County Council requests the following delegations at the 2025 Roma Conference. One, partner with City of Kawartha Lakes regarding the security issues for social housing within the county. Ministry of Education regarding new student busing policies as applied to rural communities.
All in favor? That's carried. Nothing under community safety and well-being, although there was a meeting yesterday, and I'm sure we'll be hearing about that at an upcoming meeting. So up to on to corporate services and finance, and a draft of the 2025 budget. Just to say that today is intended as an introduction to the budget, although some members of council have been working on it for a bit. An opportunity for everyone to ask all the questions you've got. The intention is to bring the budget back in at our mid-December meeting for approval. Unless we run into any roadblocks between now and then. So anyway, we're going to have an introduction to the budget from the CAO, and then we'll move over to Ms. Robinson for detailed presentation.
And thank you, Warden. And it's my pleasure to do the introduction of presentation of the 2025 draft budget. I think important. I just again want to thank my thanks and to the efforts put in by finance staff and particularly the directors in their efforts in putting together the budget. We have a strong commitment to fiscal responsibility within the county. We make a strong effort in prioritizing how we spend our money. We've made a number of changes in the budget where we shifted money away from certain things to reference the importance of them, and they'll be talked about in detail going forward. And it's part of that prioritization and is making sure that we're still providing services as required for our citizens, but not only that, but they're efficiently done and effectively done in a cost-effective manner. In the presentation, you'll notice our budget process is ever evolving. I think it's getting stronger and a little more transparent, identifying a little more accountability, but also putting the information out to council and the public in a way that's easily understood. We're just not providing spreadsheets to people. We're actually putting things in textual form, which allows people to understand the topic, but also why we're doing, or the influences on the budget, some that we can control. And as we're going to talk today, a lot of them we have at best indirect control over the impacts on us as well. And I think the way the budget is put together, it reflects a careful balance of the acknowledgement of the impacts of any increase on the ratepayers across the county, but also at the same time, we're recognizing the pressures being put on the local municipalities as well, the spheres of influence that directly relate to them, that we've taken that into account when we're applying our piece, because we realize it's everybody's paying off two budgets. And on particular note is the significant rate increases for OPP services across the lower tiers, which are averaging around 22% increases over last year. And so we've taken all that into consideration. However, at the same time, we experience our own significant financial pressures at the county level as well. And notably for us, and it's a very important service, and it's one we partner with City of Kawartha Lakes on, is social services and housing services for the county. We're going to be experiencing a 33% increase in costing, as stands now, and based on the draft budget numbers from the City of Kawartha Lakes, that will see an increase in cost to the county of just a little under $700,000, which has a significant impact on our budget going forward. And these increases again come in a time as we're also facing the challenge where once again we've received a 15% decrease in the infrastructure funding we receive from the province as a whole, and so which is compounded since it's been the same decrease for the past 3 years, and the 15% year over year since 2022. And to put it in perspective, in 2022 we received $630,000 infrastructure funding from the province, and in 2025 we're going to receive $387,000 in funding. So there's a delta that we have to make up to maintain our program going forward. This is particularly important to us, as council will remember from the presentation on both the asset management plan and the structures. The structures report that was brought forward on the large culverts and structures in the last number of months of council, where we have a significant obligation to the community to invest in the infrastructure of the county, which currently stands. We have a $1.4 million annual infrastructure gap at the county level, which means that we have $1.4 million more worth of work that we have to do than money that we're currently collecting to do that work. Council has been very progressive in the last 2 years in doing so. We've instituted a dedicated infrastructure levy within the county, which is helping us whittle that down. We'll be addressing that going forward. And given the numbers with the work done to the new asset management plan and the program going forward, we're recommending that council re-examine that number to increase it going into 2025. I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion on that as well. But again, the goal behind that, we're trying to make decisions that mitigate any significant spikes in rate increases as we go forward. If we start collecting on a slower basis now, then looking at massive increases when a certain project comes on stream going forward. These, again, as I've said this before, and I try to say this every time we have a budget meeting, is that we are faced with the inevitable challenge of raising funds to do the work that we're charged to do with on an antiquated revenue system, which is the property tax base. It was a system that was introduced in Ontario in 1849. And aside from some new classifications put in place, it's roughly the same process, the same system that was put in place in 1849. It's a regressive tax-based system, which has no indication, there's no bearing on how much our residents make or earn. It's what their property is worth. Particularly compounded in Haliburton County when we have roughly 72% of our tax base is residential properties. Just in perspective, the provincial average is 21%. So we're very mindful of that, and we will continue to push through council, through AMO and other associations to working with the province on a more balanced economic system whereby we are recognizing the need to provide certain services, but also recognizing the impact the current system has on everyday people and trying to live their lives, as well as us keep the roads safe and the bridges up and things of that nature. So with that, I think you'll find you'll be as impressed as I have been with the work that staff has done in putting this together, recognizing all those challenges we have, even in areas where we may not have direct control over it. We have indirect control. We've made modifications how we do things to mitigate any increase. And I think the last thing I'll say is, without stealing any of Ms. Robinson's thunder, we're looking at roughly a 5.1% rate increase for the county. 1.1% of that is the operation of the county itself. The balance of it is through outside forces that we either have no control over or just indirect control over, which will be fully explained to council going forward. So I think staff has done a very strong job in keeping the cost of operating the county at a very good, very strong level. But as we understand the pressures council is under, both at this level and at the local level going forward, and we look forward to your questions and comments.
Before we go to Ms. Robinson, I just wanted to say that department heads are here. They have microphones. If you have specific questions about departmental issues, they're here to try to respond to your questions. So over to you, Andrea.
Thank you. Good morning, Warden and Council. Thank you to the CAO for the introduction. Just wait for the presentation to go up. I'm happy to be presenting the 2025 draft budget on behalf of the senior management team this year. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Today's presentation will be coming primarily from myself and the CAO, with the directors available to answer any department-specific questions that council may have. Staff were tasked with developing their budgets using the main categories of base level adjustments, inflation, catch-up items such as loss of funding, pre-approvals of council, and growth items, which include any enhanced service level or new programs. As staff continue on updating the county's budget process and documentation, we have introduced a new form this year, the budget inclusion forms. These forms were to be completed by staff for all capital, new budget items, or for any base budget items that were more than a 3% increase. These forms provide the necessary detail for council for their review and consideration. These, along with the budget summary report, are enhancing our level of information sharing, understanding, and clarity for both council and the members of public. As the warden notified you, you are receiving the first draft today with updates coming to your December 11th meeting with the anticipation of adopting the tax rate bylaw at your first meeting in January. Next slide, please. Staff have prepared their budgets based on council's identified projects and priorities, along with staff's understanding of council's expectations combined with departmental planning documents. The draft budget presented today includes a total levy requirement of $25,065,892. This is an increase of $1,808,934 from 2024, and an additional cost of $13 per $100,000 of residential assessment for the ratepayer. This levy increase has been aided by a 1.46% growth in assessment. Next slide, please. This slide provides council the breakdown of the levy increase by division, with the majority of the increases being seen in public works and social services. With the health division showing as a decrease on this slide, I want to assure council that the budgets have not decreased. They, however, do have increased revenues from the Ministry of Health, cross-border billing, and also have a reserve transfer to help offset their increased costs. Next slide, please. Please feel free to slow me down if you think I'm going too fast too. Similar to 2024, the total inflation increases account for 23% of the total levy increase at $415,000. Inflation increases in operational items such as materials and software licensing account for $46,000 of that total. Capital roads construction and fleet purchases account for $131,000, and $238,000 are inflationary increases to our transfers to other entities such as MPAC, the Health Unit, City of Kawartha Lakes, and the Haliburton County Public Library. Next slide, please. Wages and benefits for the county is the largest operating expense. This includes all staff represented by 2 CUPE locals and a non-union and management group. These increases include a 4-year collective agreement with CUPE locals 4435 and 1960. As 1960 settled their collective agreement in 2024, new items included in the base wage budget for 25 would be the increases to the personal health account from $1,000 to $1,200 per employee, and the increases in both clothing and boot allowances from $200 to $400. Council has approved for all non-union and management to receive the same wage compensation increases of those of 1960. We have been notified too of increases to our statutory payroll deductions with CPP, EI, and OMERS. Along with, we've included an estimated 5% for our Manulife benefit premium increase. The base wage and benefit budget is a total increase of $578,000. Materials and supplies is the county's next largest operational expense, seeing a 2.55% increase from 2024. Materials and supplies category includes such things as IT licensing costs, building expenses like heat, hydro, and internet, operational vehicle costs such as fuel, maintenance and repair parts, programming, training, and insurance premiums. The majority of this year's increases are seen in the IT and Public Works departments, with IT seeing an 11% increase to their base licensing budget from 2024, and Public Works with a 6.3% increase due to needed facility maintenance, increase in winter material costs, and unscheduled culvert replacement, and the increase in extreme weather events causing flooding. The county spends approximately 1.27 million on operating contracted services. Contracted services that fall under this category include legal, accounting, consultant services, roads maintenance contractors such as roadside mowing or line painting, as well as contracts related to the delivery of various programs within the county. Contracted services has increased by $67,000 from 2024 and is primarily due to contract engineering design services for future roads projects. The debt repayment noted on this graph includes both the principal and interest payments. Next slide, please. Here you'll see the entire 2025 draft budget by division and cost center. This was something that was requested during the 2024 draft budget presentation, so I wanted to include for council this year. It identifies for you which cost centers fall within which divisions. It may be easier for you to review within your budget summary report, but it does outline the total revenues, the net reserve transfers, and the total expenditures for each cost center within the county. Next slide, please. Included in the 2025 draft budget is just over $6.27 million to be transferred to other entities. This is an increase of $772,000 from 2024. 238 of this increase was already recognized in the previous slide for inflationary reasons. 30,000 of this is to catch up as social services discretionary benefits were funded from reserves in 2024. And then the remaining just over 500,000 increase is related to growth items for both City of Kawartha Lakes and the physician recruitment with the addition of the new part-time physician on the county's incentive program. Next slide, please. The county currently has 3 active debentures. 2015, 1.725 million was borrowed over a 20-year term for the construction of the Minden ambulance base. 2020, 3 million was borrowed for a 10-year term for 3 roads construction projects. And 2022, 4.152 million was borrowed for a 10-year term for the completion of 6 structure projects, all of which are identified on that slide. The total debt repayment budget for 2025, excluding interest costs, is $798,000. The county's maximum annual repayment limit set within the debt policy is 15% of the county's net revenues, and based on the county's 2024 numbers, that would equate to just over $3.8 million. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending the county issue a new debenture in 2025 for the renovation project of 11 and 12 Newcastle Street. This project is estimated to cost a total of $1.621 million. Staff are recommending utilizing the remainder of the Safe Restart and Modernization funding for this project in the amount of $421,000, with the remaining $1.2 million being funded by debenture. It's anticipated we would not require these funds until late 2025, and therefore no new debt payments have been included in the 2025 budget, and they would start in 2026. On this slide, I've shown different debenture options based on current rates. Currently, the county's earning a higher interest rate on their investments than the cost to borrow, and therefore staff are recommending borrowing for this project and not utilizing reserve monies. Next slide, please. Under the Municipal Act, the county is required to prepare a balanced budget where revenues equal expenses. The total revenue to match the just over $36 million in spending is summarized on this slide. Property taxes are the most significant source of funding for the county and will account for just over $25 million of the total budgeted revenue for 2025. Funding from upper level governments is our next largest source of revenue for the county. And although we have seen a slight increase overall in 2025 of almost 210,000, which is largely due to the land ambulance funding, there are some decreases to note for council. OMPF continues to be phased out, and we have been notified of another 15% decrease for 2025 or 18,900. As the CIO previously mentioned, OCIF continues to decrease with receiving 630,000 in 22, and we've been notified 387,000 in 25. Municipal funding are the recoveries for services and or purchases made on the locals' behalf. This is mainly within our IT and public works departments. User charges are based on the county's tariff of fees bylaw, which is reviewed on a minimum annually by staff to make any required inflationary or program-related cost adjustments. Next slide, please. Staff have identified any enhanced service levels, new programs, or funding anticipated due to growth. The total amount included in the draft budget for growth items is 2.53 million of expenses, which is offset by an increased funding of 1.81 million for a net levy impact of $713,000. The majority of the 1.819 of the increased revenue is allocated to the new proposed debenture of 1.2 million. The land ambulance and land ambulance with anticipated increased funding from the Ministry of Health in the amount of 304,000 and cross-border billing in the amount of 165,000. The balance of the increased growth revenue is due to increased municipal recoveries, aggregate resource revenue, and the Canada Community Building Fund, which is also known as gas tax funding. The proposed renovation project, ambulance cost increases, and the new roads fleet tracking system make up the majority of the capital growth items. Land ambulance has seen substantial vehicle cost increases over the last few years, with an ambulance costing $135,000 in 2019 to $228,000 in 2024. In an effort to mitigate budget increases over the last few years, EMS has been funding these increases with reserves. Also impacting this is the addition of the power load system in our ambulances starting in 2024, which is an additional $40,000 per ambulance. This year, staff have increased the ambulance fleet and equipment budget by $160,000 to address this ongoing issue. Public Works has included $70,000 to upgrade their AVL GPS system for their plow trucks, as they have been experiencing issues with their current system. Upgrading to this proposed software would align them with the 4 local municipalities, as they are all currently operating with this system. The software allows staff to monitor fleet, winter operations, as well as salt management. Next slide, please. The operating expenditure growth of 534,000 represents 21% of the total growth expense items included in the draft budget. I've included on the slide a summary of the expenditures that make up the operating expenditure growth. The largest of the projects or purchases being the increased roads maintenance culvert project and the legal and engineering fees for future road projects, such as traffic signal design and the right-of-way project with Algonquin Highlands. Also, within the growth operating expenses, staff are recommending the addition of 2 new positions this year. With some reorganization of current positions, along with the savings of the 1 new proposed position, staff have been able to include these 2 positions with a 2025 levy impact of $24,000. The first recommendation is a second mechanic. With the increased workload and demand for more specialized vehicle maintenance and repair services, a gap has been identified in the current staffing structure. A number of current challenges would be addressed with the addition of this position. However, the main one would be reducing our outsourced repair costs. The addition of this position would not only improve the public works fleet maintenance, it would also allow for land ambulance to be serviced in-house. The 2024 vehicle parts and repair budget for land ambulance is $138,000 in 2024. This has been reduced to $58,000 for 25 to account for savings of this identified position. The addition of this position has a net zero impact on the levy. With the second position, with the delivery of the paramedic service master plan, council were made aware that the County of Haliburton is the only Eastern Ontario service without a paramedic supervisor position in place. This position was introduced with the 2024 budget deliberation, with 1 full-time paramedic supervisor included within the budget for a period of 9 months. As the land ambulance is a 24/7 service, in order to fully staff with a supervisor, 4 positions are needed in total. This year, staff have included a second supervisor position for a period of 9 months. There have been some delays with filling the 2024 budgeted position, so we have utilized that budget to fund 1 of the 2025 positions. With the retirement notice of our chief, it's anticipated that these new positions will not be filled until the new chief is in place. Next slide, please. Catch-up items are the items such as loss of funding, the end result of phasing in new positions or programs, or utilizing reserves to cover operations. Good news that our catch-up items have decreased drastically from 24, from just over $1 million to $529,000 in 2025. As identified previously on the revenue slide, the decreases of the OCIF and OMPF funding, along with decreased rental and miscellaneous revenues, for a total of $149,000 of lost funding. We utilized $101,000 of reserves to fund operations in 2024 for economic development, IT, and social services discretionary benefits. $160,000 of catch-up is to fully budget the new EMS assistant added in 24 and the anticipated impacts of required job evaluations to be done in 25. Also included on this slide is the small start of $112,000 to begin our sustainable structures program within our base budget. As you may remember from previous presentations, the county currently does not have a sustainable capital structure levy built into the base budget, like roads construction and fleet, and is something that staff continue to work towards. Next slide, please. Reserves and reserve funds are funds that can be that have been set aside to meet future funding requirements established by council, legislation, or agreement. Reserve and reserve funds are a critical financial tool for increasing sustainability and flexibility while reducing vulnerability. They provide options to respond to unexpected issues, phase in funding impacts over time, as well as reduce reliance on debt. The transfers with the transfers of to and from reserves within the draft budget, it is anticipated at this time that the county will end 2025 with approximately $9 million in reserves. Of that balance, just under $4 million is for committed projects and/or purchases. Next slide, please. As identified in the county's recently adopted asset management plan and previously mentioned by the CAO, we are anticipating a funding gap over the next 10 years of approximately $14 million. In an effort to start to address this issue, Council approved a 1% dedicated capital levy with the 2024 budget. To continue our efforts to address the shortfall and mitigate future significant tax rate increases, staff are recommending that Council increase the dedicated capital levy from 1% to 2% as part of the 2025 budget approval. This slide illustrates that by increasing the dedicated levy to 2% in 25, it would result in a capital reserve of approximately $7.083 million by 2034. This calculation is based on a 4% interest rate and a 3% increase annually to the $475,000 contribution in 2025. Next slide, please. To assist with your budget discussions, I wanted to be able to provide council the figures of what a 1 to 2% capital levy would result in by 2034. As you can see, it ranges from 3.7 million to 7 million worth of capital reserve contribution, depending on what council deems appropriate with the 2025 budget cycle. Next slide, please. It's important to recognize how the decisions made within the 2025 budget process impact the following years. Staff have utilized reserves along with phasing in new positions in an effort to reduce the required levy ask in 2025. Known items that should be brought to council's attention for potential impacts in 26 and beyond are included on this slide. There are approximately $400,000 in identified items that could affect the operational budget in 26 and $385,000 that could affect the capital budget as we continue to phase in the sustainable structure program. Next slide, please. Here I want to provide a comparison for council. We've plotted the 2023 tax rates for all of our EOWC members. We're using 23 data as 24 data will not be available through MMAH until mid-25. As you can see from this slide, with the proposed 2025 increase of 5.15%, plus 2%, the county will continue to be the second lowest tax rate of the EOWC group as compared to their 2023 rates. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the 2025 draft budget is a total levy requirement of $25,065,892, which is an increase of $1,808,934 from 2024. Of this increase, 78% or $1.447 million of the levy increase is comprised of inflation, catch-up items, and transfer payments to other entities. And with that, I will pass that back to the warden.
Thank you so much. Excellent presentation, lots of good information. I would, before we get to questions, like to echo our CAO's words and thanks to our CAO, to yourself, and to all of our department heads for the work that you've all done to bring us to the point where we are today. Because I know we started with something that was like more than twice as much as where we are now. So our thanks and gratitude for your hard work on that. I know that there's a lot of questions. I think maybe one of the first things that we need to land on, or maybe it's the last thing that we need to land on, is where we stand with the dedicated capital levy. and what our thoughts are, because there's a considerable difference there, as shown from one of the last slides. So that's one of the primary things that I think we need to decide on today, along with any other questions or comments that council's got. So over to council. Questions, comments? Councillor Carter.
So as council knows, Councillor Ferry and Warden Danielson and I have had a couple of picks at this budget before we get here today. And I'll have to say a couple of things. Again, congratulations to all the staff for putting all of this together. The work that was done and really lessened the amount of work that we had to do in trying to find savings and so on, because everybody had worked so diligently at putting together their budget. And I have to mention those forms for the request for inclusion in the budget, which has to come up with a better name for that form, was very, very helpful, because it anytime somebody was going to add something to the budget, we had the full explanation. And, as an example, for instance, the mechanic, the extra mechanic, which is a substantial amount of money when you consider all of the equipment and so on that is associated with that, it ends up being fully explained that at the end of the day, it saves us money. So, that it becomes a no-brainer to be able to add something like that into the budget. I guess, being here, we're here representing the county, but we also recognize that we're representing our municipalities, and the municipalities are going to have a very difficult time with the budget, because some of the increases, and, noticeably notably the OPP one is a huge hit at the municipal level. But I know we're talking now about this dedicated amount of money for capital. We're all in the process of putting together our asset management plans, and we're all going to be behind in being able to service those plans. So I am concerned with going right from the 1%, which I fully support, to the 2% in 1 year, because every dollar, we only have one taxpayer. And so the amount of money that we are collecting, whether we collect it municipally or at the county level, is coming from the same place. So I would suggest that we look at a situation where, I would propose 1.25% this year, with us going with a plan to increase it by 0.25% each subsequent year. Because if we take the 2% here, that's going to impact with the ability for us at the municipal level to be able to finance our programs. So, I would suggest that we take a little less aggressive approach to this. I know it's I know it's a gap in funding, but we all have this gap, and so we should try to equalize the pain, if you will, as we go forward.
Councillor Ferry.
Well, certainly that was a point of discussion at the meetings that we had, and I think we landed around 1.25 or 1.5 at the most. But on the bottom line is here that 1% will, when we projected it out, Andrea, to 2026 or whatever, 1% on last year's levy is not going to be the same as 1% on this year's levy. So how did we make that grow to get that that final number of 14 or
So
7 million or something?
sorry, 1% for 2025 is $239,000.
Right. Okay, but
So projecting from 2025 forward, we used a 3% increase on that 1% or 2% for this year. So this year we're recommending 2%, which is $478,000. And going forward from this year, we've added 3% to that 478 to
So
project out the
it
10
grows
years.
every year then.
Yes.
Okay. By the way, I want to congratulate staff for the work they did. I think they did a great job. I don't think we've had to cut services here. I think our services are good and we're pretty conscious of that and it was a great job done. I have, can I ask the library a question about library now? The staff or the IT department suggested to the library that they could do the work and save hiring the librarian and substantial saving. Why did we turn that down? Can somebody answer me why the library board turned that down?
Just from the staff perspective, it was a presentation made to the library staff about a potential savings, that we could assume that role. I can't speak directly to the library board itself.
Okay. Did that come to the library board? Yeah, Jennifer?
Councillor Dayu.
I stand to be corrected, but I do not recall it coming to the library board. We do have a board meeting this afternoon, and I would be very happy to follow up on that at the board and come back with a report.
It's a substantial saving, and I think they've hired another person already. Not sure.
They have.
That's a problem.
So that will remain an outstanding issue.
Yeah.
Just before I go to Councillor Dayu, I just wanted to counter or add to what Councillor Carter said about the dedicated capital levy. When I see the difference between 1%, 1.25 and 1.5, you know, there's still such a substantial gap that I worry about that. And, you know, I sort of landed on 1.5%. I definitely agree that moving to 2 is maybe being a bit too aggressive. But I'd like to see us consider 1.5 as opposed to 1.25. I just gets us that little bit further ahead. Councillor Dayu.
Thank you. Yes, my first question actually is possibly my only question when it comes to this budget document, because there is so much information here and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to read through all of the budget inclusion requests, because you can very quickly see there ain't no gravy here. Like these are operational needs. There ain't no gravy. And when it's described to us, that of the 5.15% increase, only about 1% is within our control, my God, that's an excellent result for the county to come that close to what we've got going without any reduction in services. So I have very few questions. I think my only question about the document at the minute is, you referred to the renovation project for here and across the road. The amount that you specified as that project will cost, does that include the works that have already taken place across the road, or is that only moving ahead?
The project across the road has not started yet.
Oh, it is not started at all?
No,
Okay.
there have been delays with the project.
Okay. In that case, I wonder if this is a luxury we can ill afford at this time. I wonder if there are alternate opportunities to use that space for staff, because we do need additional staff space, to not transform this. You know, I think we would all love to have a more accessible space. I mean, this space is fully accessible with our, you know, with our elevator, but
Have you ridden in the elevator? I'm sorry.
but I think if there's anything that we could consider cutting further, that would be the one that strikes me as possible.
Mr. CEO.
Yeah, so just from the standpoint of, so the asset across the street, the old Line Ridge office, so it's what I'd refer to as diminishing asset. I mean, it has an undersized HVAC system. It's not capable of supporting activity in the building. The roof needs a repair. There's mold issue in the building. That so work has to be done. So whether it's moving the cost difference between moving staff over there or council over there, it's going to be roughly the same price because it's those core service areas that have to be done. With respect to this building, this building has some accessibility issues. Washrooms, for example, the lift itself is to the yes, it technically is a lift, but there is some issues with it going forward, as well as access points into the building do not meet the code. The AODA. So there's a number of things that have to be done no matter what. And I think from the standpoint of the asset across the street, yes, that's what we looked at when we were trying to put it together and how we were going to finance to move it forward. Work has to be done over there no matter what, even if it were to sit empty, because if we don't do something with it, it's going to keep deteriorating in its current form. So I'll just leave that as for part of the discussion.
One other point about that is that if for instance, we decided that we were just going to like hold off making it a council chambers and make it available for staff space, there would end up being additional work that we'd end up having to do because it's a different use, different applications, different things that we'd have to do with the space. So I think overall it would end up costing us more money to defer council moving over there and have it used for staff space. Councillor Carter.
Just add to it, I don't think there's any impact on the budget of doing that because it's borrowing and it would only start to be paid back in 26, correct?
Yes, it wouldn't affect the 25 budget, but would affect the 26.
Right.
Councillor Fury.
Well, I kind of have to agree with Jennifer. It's nice to have, but it's not definitely necessary to do.
I'm
So-
hearing that it is necessary.
Well, it is because we don't have room for the staff. Is that
No,
here now?
Just to clarify my comment, so we are running some space issues with staff here.
Okay.
But I think my comment specifically was the asset itself across the street because of the state of the HVAC system, the physical structure itself. If we don't do work, it's going to
Yeah, fall
basically,
down.
it's not quite fall down, but we're having mold issues, stuff like that. There'd be definite
It's
issues.
another pine stone, isn't it?
Well, so I think it's just from an asset protection standpoint, no matter what the use ends up being, the investment's required.
Well, I'm not against it,
Yeah.
but it just made the point
Yeah.
that your point was right.
I hate to think that it was the same as the Pine Stone. I think, we've been a little more responsible than that. Councillor Shell.
If we could go back to the library position you were talking about, is that the technology and systems coordinator? Because on June 11th, Ms. Andrea Brown did bring to the library board her the staffing model review report, and it did include that position to add. So that did come to us on June 11th then.
I'm not sure of the timing between,
That's the only thing I can find. I just thought I'd look back because I couldn't recall that being there, but it is showing in the model review, so I don't know if that's.
I'm just wondering about the timing of when the discussion took place between. between IT
I'm unsure of
and,
that, but.
Yeah, I absolutely recall that. I think the piece that we need to clarify at the board meeting today is is precisely the offer from IT and to remind the board, including myself, whether that offer was also brought to the board.
I
for
completely
conversation.
agree. I just didn't want to sit here as a board member and say, no, we'd never heard about it when on June 11th, we actually did. I just don't know that we understood the
but there were
impact it
other
might have and that
opportunities.
there might have been another solution.
Thanks. Councillor Carter, then Councillor Fury.
Yeah, the other outstanding issue, of course, is this city of Kawartha Lakes and all the services. That until they finalize their budget and finalize what they're going to do there, I mean, that's a huge chunk of change. And I know sitting on two of those boards that it's certainly not a done deal, and their additional positions in particular are probably I assume will change. I don't imagine the city of Kawartha Lakes is looking to have a 31% increase in their budget in that area. So, that's gonna be, that makes a big change in what our number is, and then, what we feel that we can afford for other things.
And from what I understand, we've been trying to get have some updated information from them, and
Yep.
I don't think we've had success.
Yes, I've been speaking with my counterparts at the City of Kawartha Lakes. Our budget processes are kind of running concurrently. We're a bit ahead of them, but they're running a bit of a different program. So we're looking for just information back on where it lies in the thing. And I think we have a month, as we're saying, we're introducing today. We're referring the budget into December 11th. So hopefully in that time frame, we'll get a little, to Councillor Carter's point, we'll have a little closer understanding as to what the number is. We budgeted for the upper end based on what was told for. So our indications, anything that's going to happen, it will decrease. But hopefully as we go through the next 30 days, we'll get a clearer picture from CKO.
Councillor Fury.
I'd like to clarify, when the county suggested the IT would do we have it? It mustn't have been after June. I can't believe it would be. How long ago was that?
I'd refer to Mr. March on that.
I'll have to check my notes, but I believe it was in the summer. Bear with me.
Okay, I think that's a critical point to resolve here, because it's a substantial saving.
And whether, I know that the board had intended to fill that position, but whether they had an option
Yeah,
provided to them.
that's the key question.
Councillor Rao, then Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the infrastructure levy and where we stand on that. And staff has recommended 2%. And that's not 2% of the overall levy. That's maybe 2% of that line item that we're talking about, going from 1% to 2%. So when you start deciding if you're going to drop that from 2% to 1%, how is that going to affect the 5.1? And in my opinion, that's going to be a square root of almost nothing. Go ahead.
So just from the standpoint, the 5.1 is exclusive of the dedicated levy. So the 5.1 is the operational piece that Ms. Robinson presented.
Okay.
We would add anywhere from, we currently have 1% now. And so anything about would be added to the 5.1%. So if it wasn't changed, it'd be 6.1% would be the total levy. And then just mathematically increase from there, depending on what council lands on. It's additional to, and it's 1% of the same calculation we use. So it's the 1% is $247,000 plus or minus. And it would be, sorry,
239,000.
239, excuse me. So it would be, we'd collect an additional 239 over and above what's collected through the 5.1%.
Go ahead, Councillor Rao.
First, thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
Okay, because I wasn't sure where it all fit. So now I understand. So if we
Yeah.
were to put 2% in, we'd be looking at 7.1.
That's correct.
Which would be the same as what we did last year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Close.
And the argument now becomes, should we keep it down to 6.1 or go to 7.1?
Or somewhere in
Or
between.
somewhere.
Or somewhere in between, somewhere in between. I think what you've also painted is a clear picture of what the cost of not doing it is. We're looking at the cost of doing it, which both of my colleagues have brought to the table. But you've also identified the cost of not doing it. That is to say, if we do not increase it to some level close to 2%, then it's going to bite us in the butt somewhere down the road. It would be nice to be able to say that the numbers you projected for the upcoming years will be those numbers. Having said that, I will bet you dollars to donuts that those numbers are low. I think you're going to probably find that as time passes, costs are going to go up. Mother Nature is going to do great, wonderful things to our roads, and we're not going to be able to sustain it to the numbers that we have at the moment. So in my mind, if it goes down to where we should stand, my personal opinion is we should be as close to 2% as we possibly can afford, as opposed to going down to 1.25%. I just don't support 1.25%.
Councillor Carter, then Councillor Dayou.
The problem with that argument, of course, is that, if we add more taxes at the county level, we can't add them at the municipal level, and at the municipal level, we're gonna have the same gap as as the county has. So all I'm saying is that, you know, we're all gonna be in probably a similar gap situation. So let's raise everybody up at the same time, not throw all the money at the county and then not have the municipal levies go up to be able to make up for the gap. So it's, you know, that's all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say I want to reduce this down as low as possible. I'm looking at the, you know, the four municipalities also, because I know that we in Minden are going to have a fairly substantial gap, and I'm assuming Dysart is also, and you guys probably have an awful lot of bridges and things like that that are going to contribute to your gap, and buildings and so on. But my real point was going to be on two things. One, this library thing. I mean, every department here has, you know, cut down to the bare bones and you know, has justified every penny that they need to spend to provide the services. When we have a situation where we have the ability of absorbing a task and providing to the library IT support with zero extra cost to the county, and then the library decides to go spend a substantial amount of money that is really not necessary. You know, I don't think how we should be funding that is one thing. And the other one that I know it may be small potatoes, but is the EMS supervisor is, instead of having it in there for 9 months, I think we should have it there for 6 months, because by the time we get around to doing that hiring process and getting the person onboarded and so on, it's probably not going to be until after, you know, July 1st. So it's, you know, maybe it's $50,000, but again, that's a 0.25% on the tax levy. So it's any pennies that we can save the taxpayers, I think we have to try to do it.
Totally accepting your statement that, you know, there is one taxpayer, and you know, whatever we all do has had, you know, the full impact on the taxpayer. I continue to try and stress the point that the county offers different services than our member municipalities, and that one should not be reduced at the expense of another. Like I try and look at them as individual things, trying to do the best job we can at both levels to keep the increases down. With respect to the library, I think that they did do a pretty reasonable job in trying to keep their increases down this year. When you look at the overall increase that was proposed, hang on, I'm not finished. However, I'm really disappointed in this gap about the, you know, the opportunity for the amount of savings in the IT work, given that we could do it for literally almost, you know, nothing. You know, that kind of saving at the library, and the fact that they continue to utilize reserves for operational purposes is just not a good practice. And so, you know, I continue to be concerned about the library and its how its budget is being managed. And I know that really we can't say here, you know, you need to do these specific things. That's not our role, but we do have to pay for the cost overall. Councillor Dyer.
On the library, with your indulgence, if you would allow us to come back with a timeline of facts, because it could be that we're missing parts of the story and we just don't know. Maybe a commitment had already been made for a new individual before the offer was fully understood. I don't know. So with your indulgence, if we could just come back with the facts before we start casting aspersions, that would be great. I have a question about assessment math with regards to the infrastructure levy. Do you have observations or initial thoughts on should impact go through with its next assessment in the next couple of years, whether there would be an advantage or a disadvantage to holding off on a large increase on the levy. Just thinking about the levels of poverty in our, in our county, the difficulties that we're seeing with MPAC assessments currently and how they don't quite match up with the reality of people's ability to afford their properties, et cetera, et cetera. So would there be any advantage to holding off on a larger increase until we get the renewed assessment and then instituting more of an increase, or does that have nothing to do one with the other?
Through your
Go ahead.
warden. Well, just two items come out of your comment. The answer is yes. I mean, if we waited, is if they do the reassessment, then we'll receive more revenue based on the assessed value of the buildings. And so potentially the need increase wouldn't be there. However, the province has given no indication that they are entertaining the release of the reassessment. Given the length of time it's taken, I'm not sure the impact of that reassessment. It would be massive. It's because we're currently sitting at a 2016 assessed rate on our properties. To jump to 2024, or even if they went to 2022, I think when the assessment was completed, would be significant. Yeah, it literally is just math. But the problem, the longer we wait, it impacts us, our ability to provide the service. It's not a fair system going forward. But yeah, I mean that's just the impact is we would collect less money in the interim, waiting for it to occur, and it just impacts our ability to plan for the works we need done.
Councillor Carter.
So just one other comment about the tax rate and the comparisons with all the other counties. Of course, we're in that, as you said, we are different than the other counties because of the percentage of our tax rate that comes from, citizens in terms of property taxes. It's a lot easier to be able to increase the tax rate on corporations and businesses, but we don't have that. We're taking it from people's pockets. The other thing that you note about the poverty, we are down in the, one of the lowest income areas in the province. So the fact is that, taking an extra dollar from somebody who's deciding whether it's food or medicine is a lot different than taking a dollar from somebody who's deciding what restaurant to eat at. So I think that's one thing in that comparison that we need to be clear on.
My concern about that is that if we institute smaller incremental increases, we sort of we avoid having to at some point down the road hit those same people with a huge increase that is that much harder to bear. That slow and incremental increases is the way to go, as opposed to holding off and then all of a sudden you have to hit them with a gigantic increase, which is impossible to cover. Go ahead, and then Councillor Rao.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting at all that we're going to try to delay it so that at some point in the future we've got this big football that we have to absorb. All I'm trying to say is that we have to look at it in the totality with the four municipalities, and we can't make everything good at the county and then impoverish the four municipalities. I'm just saying we're all going to be behind on this infrastructure gap. And, we have roads and we have sewers and we have water and all sorts of projects that we have to be able to finance. All I'm saying is let us work together, the four municipalities and the county, and increase those levies as somewhat equally, because we're all probably going to be equally behind. Some may be even further behind. So we just can't do it all and fix the county situation and hurt the municipalities. So I'm not saying not go forward. We're all going to be behind. Let's try to work at it equally together.
Councillor Rail?
I don't think anybody at the table disagrees with that. It all comes down to, we got to make tough decisions based on what's there. And I sit on a municipal council at the lower tier as well. The whole point is, when you're sitting at that table, I sit predominantly as a municipal member, remembering what I'm supposed to be keeping track of at the county. And now I'm sitting at this table, where now I'm a county councillor, looking at what needs to be done at the municipal level. And I am not for 1 minute remotely arguing with what you're saying. But at the end of the day, there is going to be needs at this level that have to be dealt with at this level. And the fact that it may or may not impact something in a lower tier is inevitable to happen no matter what we do. The only way that would happen is if we were to do a negative increase, in which case now life would be perfect, except nothing would work. So you know, and again, I was adamant about wanting to go closer to a 2%. But I would agree with after listening to your argument and Councillor Ferry's argument, I could see 1.5 being something that we could deal with. But 1.25 is cutting off our nose to spite our face. We're just not going to have enough cash to make it work. Not if we want to keep up with what our CAO is telling us. So would I accept a 1.5? Absolutely. Would I accept a 1.25? No. Still no on the 1.25.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments or anything else on the, I mean, we've got time to think about this, but are there other items on the budget that you have questions or concerns about? Councillor Shell? Did I see your?
No, I
hand?
didn't really have a question. I was just agreeing with what Councillor Ryland said. I could settle at the 1.5% as well, if that's kind of what you're looking for consensus.
Councillor Fury? I mean, it is a reduction from the, you know, for the proposed 2% that, you know, I think that's a reasonable midpoint.
Councillor Carter's comments from social housing and some of those things, if that comes in a little better, then we won't be under so much pressure.
So the proposed change might be from them deciding that they weren't going to implement as many staff increases as they were suggesting? Well, I think generally speaking, I'm hearing the majority of us saying 1.5. I mean, I see you're not in agreement with that, but you know, I've heard that's where I stand. Councillor Fury, Councillor Shell, Councillor Royale, and Councillor Burton.
I can live with 1.5, but if I didn't ask for 1.25, we'd still be at 2. So
Councillor Dayu.
Just for the record, I think I would have preferred 1.25 because there is such a level of poverty here, and I think our assessments are unjust. And until they have been rectified, there are going to be people paying more, I think, than they should, based on what their neighbor next door is paying, and that's just going to be a fact of life. So I would have preferred 1.25, but I'm happy to go with the consensus of 1.5 without kicking up a fuss.
We wouldn't want to see you kick up a fuss. So do you need direction on that, or we'll come back with that recommendation?
Yeah, as we move forward, as we mentioned at the start, we're just here to information and discussion at this point in time. We will we've already run the calculations on the different increment increases on that. It's an add-on to the base levy. And we'll bring those forward back in December we're not looking for a decision now, but it's good direction. And we'll include that as our piece going forward. And hopefully our conversations with the city of Kawartha Lakes will have progressed to certain things. We'll have a little more clarity on what the actual increase on social services and housing is going to be.
Councillor Dayu.
That's great. I think I would feel more comfortable if we could go around the project across the road just one more time at the staff level, just to see, is there something that we might do that is slightly different to what has been proposed that would cost us a little bit less? Maybe whatever it is. I've not even been across the road since our land documents were over there a number of years ago. So, is there anything that we could do there to lessen that project? If that could be looked at before we have our next conversation, that'd be great.
Just two things to reiterate the comments brought up by Councillor Carter. So the way it's been structured, the project of the land registry office in this building there's no financial impact on 2025. Now, to your point though, yes. So we've gone through it on a number of iterations on the work to be done, and we've modified things as well. My opinion is it's based on what the intent of the changes are. We've got it pretty much as low as it can be and still be functional. But that information will be coming back to council before we move forward, before we're entering into contracts. That will be presented to council in its totality. So that will be in kind of an ongoing piece over the course of this year.
So that's great, and I absolutely take on faith that conversation has already been had, and I do understand that it wouldn't impact our budget for this year. But I remember when I was 18 and being given my first credit card and being told of the credit card does have its own implications, and if we desire something now and we put it on credit, we pay for it eventually. So it's not only this budget that I have in mind.
Councillor Carter.
The one thing that we had a discussion with the CAO yesterday about this thing about roads. Is there any possibility that any of that is going to impact 25 budget?
I'm sorry, what thing about roads?
Yeah, I'll let him.
It's the of the classification or the reclassification of our roads to increase the standard of care on the road. I'd defer to Mr. Kuche on the timing of that.
Thank you for the question. We are presently looking at a classification of our road and in accordance to the traffic counts that we did through spring, summer, and fall. Some roads it looks like they will be impacted, but for the level of service that we are currently providing those roads, at this point, it will be very minimal impact. And staff will do all they can to minimize that impact moving forward as well.
I guess if we haven't another month, if anything further comes up, we should at least address that at the next time we discuss budget, just in case there's anything, because we don't want to end up with a shortfall in your group or compromise your group because there are these changes coming forward.
So just for clarification and for the public's clarification, my understanding is that we've received notification that the level of service is being increased, or the required level of service for some roads?
No, the minimum maintenance the last time was in 2021 that amendments were done to minimum maintenance. Every year or on a cycle of every 3 years, we do traffic counts on all our county roads. And when there is a threshold chart that is used for for level of service or for classification of roads, which is determined by traffic count. So the number of vehicles traveling our roads. And we've seen in the since the beginning of COVID that traffic has increased on certain roads. And now we're at the point where we have some information that we can decipher and determine what that impact will be.
Yes, just one clarification to add to Mr. Kulich's comments is so it's by provincial standard based on the volume of the road. That would impact or dictate our level of service. So it may or may not change. I don't think, to Councillor Carter's point, yes, we will be monitoring going forward. And if that information exists in time at the time of the budget approval, it will be included in the budget. But based on Mr. Kulich's comments, we're anticipating a massive change, but yeah.
Any other questions or comments about any departmental recommendations? Councillor Dayu?
Looking at the reserves again, I assume there's no reserve increase to the community transportation line, but we're also not expecting to take anything out of that line for this year. Do you think there is scope in this year's operational plan to take another kick at that can somehow?
What do you mean?
Well, to look, again at what we might do with community transportation, like approaching Uber again, or whatever we might do. Is the lack of movement on that reserve line indicative of our lack of intention to do something this year, or is there something that's going to happen there?
I think our Director of Economic Development might have a comment.
Through you, Warden. Both myself and actually Sue have had some conversations with some transit providers, I guess regionally. And right now they are just in the process of coming back to us with a proposal. And this was, I should preface it, was based off just direction that we received when we brought the RFP back, was to continue to work towards this and see if we could find some solutions. When we get that information, we'll sit down internally and have a look at it and then bring something forward to council if there's, we feel it's viable financially and then would present it to council for consideration. Obviously pending conversations with our procurement staff and things like that internally, but.
Just with respect to further to Mr. Ovell's comments and just on respect to the reserves, just from a standpoint, and because they're not showing any movement in the reserve lines, doesn't mean we're not working on certain things, because the reserves move at a decision of council. We'll come back to council and say we're going to do X and we'll fund it through reserves. So that's when you'd see the alteration or transferring upwardsly. So from a process standpoint, on work being done coming out of this budget. So once the budget is finalized, the directors will finalize their work plans for 2025. I think the drafts have to be into me by the 15th of December. So once the budget's finalized, we'll finalize the work plans, and then and they'll be released back to council in January, February. So you'll have an indication of what work is being done in reference to either the immediacy of the budget or based on any of the long-term planning we've done.
Andrea?
I just wanted to add to that, similar to 24, we have included in the budget $100,000 for community transportation being fully funded by the reserve. So that money is included in the budget approval.
Councillor Rael?
First off, the conversation that I'm hearing from staff with us is unbelievably encouraging, like totally and absolutely encouraging. You're looking at the cost of doing something. You're looking at the cost of not doing something, and you're also being careful not to knee-jerk something to make it happen. And so at the end of the day, what you were planning and spoke about to me makes really good sense. Don't stop the system from being further investigated, because God knows there's a lot of things that need to be completely investigated before they're done. But on the other hand, why just jump out and spend money for the sake of spending it? So thank you very much for the approach you're taking to what we're doing, and I feel very comfortable being all that stuff being in your hands. So thanks to staff.
I think at this point I'm going to call for a 10-minute break. I would ask members, particularly yourselves, Councillor Ferry and Carter, there were at least one item that we talked about that you might want to consider. I was just going to say the closed session has been set up as a bit of a holding item. So consideration about whether or not you want to bring up one of the concerns that you had during our earlier discussions during closed. So there is that opportunity if you so desire. So 10-minute break. Okay, we call the meeting back to order. So just one last time, any more concerns or questions about the draft budget as presented? We've had some good discussion. So could I have a mover and a seconder to refer the draft budget to our mid-December meeting? Councillors McKechnie and Rael.
That the 2025 draft budget documents as presented be referred to the December 11th, 2024 meeting of County Council for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. So looking at the agenda, we come down to consideration of bylaws from the looks of things, if that's next. So I need a mover and a seconder to authorize the execution of the winter road maintenance agreement with Highlands East. Councillor Fury, Councillor Shell.
The bylaw 4269 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of winter maintenance agreement with the municipality of Highlands East be enacted.
All in favor? That's carried. No closed session is required today. So I guess I need a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Dayu and Rael.
Bylaw 4270 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the November 13th, 2024 meeting of Haliburton County Council be considered to be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Councillor McKechnie, Councillor Rael.
That the November 13th, 2024 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned at 10:50 a.m.
All in favor? That's carried.